everyone, I'm Gabe and this is Emma, and today we are joined by the wonderfully amazing Jen Henderson, Tilt CEO. And today we're going to talk about why it should suck less to do your job as an HR professional. And in particular, we're going to talk about leave of absence management. So with that, let's dive in. Jen, we kind of want to know your thoughts and experience in this space when it comes to HR and just kind of what pain points they have in the day-to-day when it comes to managing leave of absence.
Yeah, I could talk about this all day. Our HR friends and partners in the companies we support are navigating so many competing priorities. And typically, we find that individuals who are drawn to the profession of HR are empathetic. They want to help people. They got into the craft of HR because they are solutions-oriented. And quite honestly, we have yet to meet an HR professional who loves to manage leave of absence. So all of those compounding factors result in a really hard and cumbersome process for HR to navigate. Now, if I think about an exact example, I've worked with some amazing HR representatives over the years. They are all of those things and more. They are empathetic. They are people-oriented. They want to be solutions-oriented. And they're in the seat that they're in, quite literally, to represent the company. They work for the company. So they walk this very fine line between being an employee advocate and knowing that they are employed by the organization. And I've seen that in application as it relates to leave, resulting in, especially in today's leave climate, an HR representative that I worked with who was misinformed about a leave law because it's really easy to be misinformed and confused by leave laws, given the thousands of permutations that we now have in the leave space. And by being misinformed, they then shared the wrong information with an employee, which ultimately resulted in them having to claw back, is what we say, having to pull back funds that the company had paid to that employee on leave. That is a horrible situation all the way around. HR felt bad. Employees certainly didn't love to have some of their paycheck garnished and clawed back. And it was truly out of no nefarious intent and no ill will of the HR rep. They just didn't know. And I've seen that play out in different ways time and time and time again. And when we go back to the question at hand of trying to make it suck less, that's what technology is for. That is why we are in this state of the world that we're in today, is because tech should be able to say, if this, then that, very simply. And with leave, it's if this, but not this, but sometimes this. And on Tuesdays, it's this. And still, that is what technology should do, so that HR rep can be there for the human going through the life event that is causing the leave of absence. And that's what HR is best suited to do. So that very admittedly is how we make it suck less, and how I think HR deserves to have leave suck less.
I love that you talk about the fact that we, as Tilt knows, HR people are typically empathetic. They want to be the hero. They want to overall help their employee experience, and are well-intended. And when they make these mistakes, this is not only an emotional experience for the employee, but it is for the HR person as well. They don't like to be having to handle or mishandle these things. Yes. How many times have you heard from someone about, the frustrations or anxiety that they're feeling, or, what other emotions are coming into play for the person who's having to manage all this?
How many times is countless? I couldn't even try to put a number on it, would be the answer to that question. And you're absolutely right. It's, I don't know that I've ever met an individual who hasn't gone through or knows someone who's gone through a leave qualifying event. That is a welcoming of a baby, a loss of a loved one, a medical condition that they need to take time off work. It is almost a universal experience. I can say in pretty high confidence, it's a universal experience at some point in your life that you or someone you love will go through that. And when you go through that, I think I can also speak pretty confidently that the emotions are at the forefront in the driver's seat, and that does not bode well for navigating heavily complex and jargon-laden information, which is what leave is inundated with. And everywhere you turn, it's hard, and it's and it's fear-inducing, especially when there's a paid component of it or a job protection component of it, which again is usually most of the time. So the emotions are all over the board. They're heightened. They cause an amplification of all of the things when you're going through a leave. And HR is at the epicenter of that. And they're just trying to do right by their employees. I believe that in my bones. I've yet to meet an HR rep that wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm really going to try to screw this up for someone today. It's just not, it's not the mode. But again, it is like they're set up for failure in the current state of leave. There are just too many permutations of a leave of absence to keep in your head, in a spreadsheet, or on a whiteboard, which we've seen all three of those in these poor humans trying to figure it out.
Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, you outlined pretty clearly why it can be so frustrating for HR to try to manage this on their own. Why do you think it's sort of like fallen behind the technology like curve? Obviously, Tilt is here to solve that, but
Yeah.
why has leave kind of fallen? Is it a stigma thing? Is it just it? No one was listening to HR when they were saying, "Hey, this is really hard." What do you attribute that to, or a combination of all that, perhaps?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I mean, my gut and my hunch would say leave is super unpopular. Like I said, nobody likes it. So it's somewhat of this kind of redheaded stepchild of an employee life cycle. And as it comes to solutioning things, it's been pushed to the bottom of the list for so long. Um, Again, because it's not very fun. Nobody likes it except us. We freaking love leave. We live leave every day. But it also hasn't really gone through that much transformation except in the last decade or so, in which case it's hit this hyperdrive of all these new components to it. So it was kind of shelved, for lack of a better word, would be my opinion as to why it's behind the times. And then I think the third component to it is, by and large, the way that leave has lived in this world is through insurance carriers. And insurance carriers have also not really changed all that much over the last few decades. So by being essentially tied to that industry to date, it's kind of been behind the times in lockstep with the insurance world. This is my hypothesis.
Many people know that, the story of Tilt, or the precipice of Tilt, was, came from your bad experiences that you had on leave. So obviously at Tilt, we want employees to be having a positive experience, as positive as possible. But how do you feel like your feelings have shifted now, even knowing this is for HR as well, or even more so now maybe than back in the napkin days?
Yeah. One of the principles that I learned at a very young age professionally that I still hold very close is that as an organization, your employees' experience will your customers' experience will never be better than your employees' experience. I learned that. Full credit to Starbucks and Howard Schultz, and I've seen it play out time and time again. So thinking through that lens, that your customer experience will never exceed your employee experience. While my leave journey as an employee was not awesome, it was largely in partnership. And now, sitting in the seat that I sit, I can see how my HR team was really not to blame or at fault for my experience. It was my manager. Both times it was my manager. So by servicing leave the way that we do, to be able to allow the HR individual to be closer to the employee going on the leave, to focus more on the human element of it, we're able to, in some instances, circumvent. I know in my instances, I would have appreciated HR circumventing my manager. But even with the best managers out there, HR can support and partner with the manager better, because all of the practicality of it, the compliance of it, the pay calculation of it is done in the technology, which really opens up the possibility for HR to be in the seat that I know 99% of them would rather be in, which is supporting the employee.
Do you think that that manager aspect of it, I know is something that's quite personal for you, is something that in general leadership outside of HR maybe not have a firm grasp of just how important that is? Because we're talking about now this is also an additional burden on HR, right? Like HR had to find a replacement for you, a top performing, like incredible employee, all because everything was mishandled outside of HR's purview. And I guess I'm curious if that lack of visibility or understanding from like on the executive level across industries is a part of that. And what would you say Tilt is doing to kind of address that?
Yes. Yes, I would say the one of the best ways that this was ever communicated to me was a CHRO that I spoke with at the back of the napkin days of Tilt when I was doing discovery, and she said, "Unless you hit the manager jackpot, it doesn't matter what the leave policy is." Because she got it. She knew that the manager really held the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, on a leave journey, a leave experience, and the engagement that an employee has before, during, and after that leave. Even with, like I said, 20 weeks paid, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter because the manager is ultimately the conduit of that policy. So I strongly believe that not only do most organizations have a bit of a blind spot, it varies in terms of how large that is, to how important the manager role plays in a leave of absence, but also if there is an example of an employee not returning from leave or returning, but very quickly thereafter leaving, the reporting or the data to show that that was because of a mismanaged or poor experience leave of absence is really difficult to draw the line to. However, having done this now for 7 years and having supported tens of thousands of leaves, we know that that is happening. It's just happening in the shadows because, again, the reporting is clouded by, typically you'll see somebody went on leave and they didn't return. They were just milking the system, or they knew they weren't going to return anyway. Really? Really? Or the minute that leave qualifying event was reported, did they experience similar to what I experienced? Were they knocked off the career ladder, or were they put into some sort of a box that was unjustified or otherwise? So there's just not, again, bias, but in my opinion, and data backed with what we've seen, there's not the intention or the work being done to unearth how damaging this is at the feet of the managers predominantly, to know, what are the ramifications? What are the ripple effects? What is the attrition? What is the cost, to your point, Gabe, on the backfilling? I believe it's an enormous hidden cost. Enormous.
And how would you say Tilt is kind of addressing that to like hopefully help HR be able to, help themselves in this kind of way?
Yeah. I think Tilt is just getting started in helping this because it is such a pervasive, number one, and hard to point a direct line to reason code. However, I'm a big believer in trend data. So I think that the reporting capabilities of Tilt, the benefit is that we can show if a manager is having a run rate of attrition of employees on their team that is going on a leave of absence, that is a triggering event that we should partner with that HR team and offer resources as we do to go ask questions and go seek to understand what's going on. I think at a broader level, because a lot of managers don't have a regular occurrence of leave of absences, they happen more in an ad hoc or a popcorn approach. I think what we can see there is, are there corollaries to other data coming out of that department? Is there an ENPS correlation? Is there some sort of a predictive measure that's in alignment with other parts of the organization? And that's where we really get into that partnership seat with the HR team and say, like, how can we help serve your initiatives that you are aligning to the company strategy, that you are aligning to your department strategy? And let's help use Tilt as a tool to continue to inform whatever data sets that you have at hand and build out a more comprehensive approach to that. The headline would be, I think that Tilt is yet another tool that has data that could be used to inform a stronger narrative, to ask the right questions, to get to the root cause of what's going on.
Awesome.
What advice would you give to an HR person, which I'm sure you've given this advice time and time again, that's asking for this solution to help kind of alleviate this burden, stress, anxiety, whatever it is? They're asking their leadership team and they're having a hard time getting buy-in. What would you say to them?
They're asking their leadership team and are having a hard time getting buy-in to bring on a leave technology tool?
Yeah.
Yes, we do have this question frequently. I love this. I love this conversation. So, leave of absence, as a lifelong operator and having had responsibility for a P&L for decades, first and foremost, I start there. And I advocate our HR business partners that are trying to create the business case to start there. A lot of that P&L analysis can include, what is your current leave of absence admin lift? Who are servicing the leaves? What is their cost structure? What is their percent of time? Like, let's be really specific and honest how much of their time is going into your current process of managing leave. So that's a hard cost. A fixed cost is quantifiable to roll into the potential cost saving narrative. And then I would go into the inefficiencies. So then it's the communications, the rework. One of the really interesting data sets that I identified at the back of the napkin days with Tilt was how many times an employee going on a leave of absence would literally start from scratch. So an employee could be working for a 5,000 company organization or a 50 employee organization. My analysis was it didn't matter. When they found out, let's use pregnancy for an example because it's easy to understand. When they found out they were expecting, they looked around, they might have Googled like a pregnancy leave plan or a parental leave plan, but by and large, they were opening up a brand new document in their Google Suite and they were starting from scratch. Who's going to be my backfill? What do I need to prep between now and then? What are the insurance considerations? It was mind-blowing to me. I would see hundreds of the same templates built over and over and over and over again. So that's an inefficiency cost. And again, for an HR team that's trying to create a business case, that could be harder to quantify, but I would absolutely encourage they go ask some questions and put that calculation in there. And then third, and this one I get on a pretty strong soapbox about, but it's hard to draw the data set around, is what is the cost of engagement or disengagement, and what is the potential cost of turnover? Turnover is the absolute number one most expensive cost center to any org and sits pretty solely in HR's purview. So if you can look at your turnover costs and you can do your calculation, you can do some potentially strong data set, potentially anecdotal assumptions on loss or disengagement based on past underwhelming leave experiences. You add all that up and you've got a pretty big number at the end of the worksheet. And last but not least, and this one we've learned just in the time that we've been having Tilt in the market, if a company is doing business in a state that has a paid leave program, the amount of time we're seeing companies, number one, not apply at all for state programs and leaving that money completely on the table, or number two, applying inconsistently or inaccurately and having overages or underages that could result in clawbacks, could result in underpayments, kind of you name it. Those dollars add up extremely fast. And we've seen it in the millions from customers that we're going through RFPs with that are doing that business case analysis, which is just mind-boggling to me. Again, as a lifelong owner of a P&L, I'm like, there is no stronger case in the world, in my opinion. But there's a lot of those inputs that we talk through and see what has the biggest sticking power for the unique organization, see what the leadership team's orientation has been historically, and craft it for the specific needs of the business.